It's a typical evening in Caracas. Commuters head home, highway lanes are packed, and the city's iconic twin towers stand tall against the green hills. Aside from minor tremors, Venezuela hasn't experienced a major seismic event in over a century. This map shows why. Look at the Pacific coast. Places like Mexico and Chile sit right on the Ring of Fire, a volatile tectonic belt responsible for 90% of the world's earthquakes. Venezuela sits much further east, straddling the boundary between the South American and Caribbean plates. Then, 8.2 miles beneath the surface, that fault line slips. The map here zooms into a spot just 17.6 miles northwest of Montalban. A 7.2 magnitude shockwave erupts outward, tearing directly toward the northern coast. A population accustomed to geological stability is suddenly thrown off their feet. Buildings sway, sirens wail, and the region's historical sense of safety vanishes. Inside apartments and restaurants across the capital, dinner plates crash to the floor, walls crack, and heavy dust fills the air. People scramble toward exits, trying to process the violent jolting. But the earth is not finished settling. Just north of the initial rupture, the fault snaps again, this time generating an even stronger 7.5 magnitude shockwave. Looking at the seismograph for the event, we can see the exact timeline of the two strikes. From the peak of the 7.2 tremor to the arrival of the massive 7.5 hit, exactly 39 seconds pass. 39 seconds is barely enough time to realize what's happening, let alone navigate down a dark, crowded stairwell. With no window to evacuate, civilians are caught inside structures right as the second wave hits. Seismologists call this a doublet earthquake. This twin peak signature reveals two massive, distinct ruptures happening back-to-back within the same fault system. When the first 7.2 tremor hit, it didn't relieve the tension in the Earth's crust. As we can see on the diagram, the force transferred directly up the fault line, overloading an adjacent section of rock and triggering the second, larger break. The first wave bends steel and cracks load-bearing concrete. The building is weakened, teetering on the edge of failure. Then, before the dust can even settle, the second shock slams into those compromised supports, shattering them completely. Successive impacts compound structural stress exponentially. Buildings that might have survived a single quake are immediately dropped by the secondary wave. On the ground, the results are catastrophic. Entire 22-story high-rises in Caracas' Altamira neighborhood cave in, sending massive columns of dust over the city blocks. On the northern coast, La Guaira takes the brunt of the impact. Dozens of buildings flatten into piles of concrete and twisted metal, leaving rescue workers and neighbors to dig through the rubble with their bare hands to find survivors. Early reports confirm at least 164 people killed and nearly 1,000 injured, but emergency crews expect those numbers to climb. This predictive chart from the U.S. Geological Survey models the potential human cost based on the quake's physical scale. The data points to a 42% probability that the final death toll could surpass 10,000 people. As the sun sets, survivors sit on the curbs in total darkness. The shaking toppled electric poles and destroyed cell towers, plunging the hardest-hit regions into a communication blackout. That silence radiates beyond the nation's borders. For the more than 7.7 million Venezuelans living abroad, it means watching the destruction on the news with no way to contact their missing families. In under a minute, the scale of the destruction transformed the capital into an isolated catastrophe zone, overwhelming local rescue capacities. Acting President Delcy Rodriguez addressed the nation late Wednesday night, officially declaring a state of emergency to marshal all remaining resources. But the logistics of a mass rescue are failing. The country's main hub, Simón Bolívar International Airport, sustained such severe structural damage that all flights were grounded, cutting off the fastest route for heavy supplies. Without an open airport, the government relies on what's left standing. All school classes are canceled, converting gymnasiums into makeshift shelters. Every available healthcare professional is ordered to report to the nearest hospital to treat the influx of injured citizens. While the domestic mobilization is immediate, fractured highways and closed runways mean the country cannot handle the recovery effort alone. The gap is filled by an international effort. Offers of specialized rescue units and humanitarian aid pour in from regional neighbors across Latin America and from global powers like China. In Washington, President Trump ordered government agencies to move quickly, stating that the USA stands ready to assist with the devastating loss of life. Secretary of State Marco Rubio coordinates directly with the interim Venezuelan government to deploy disaster assistance teams, medical resources, and search units. Within hours, heavily equipped international crews are walking across tarmac, loading onto transport planes and racing toward the devastated regions. Decades of deep geopolitical tension are pushed aside for a single goal. The scale of the 39-second doublet has triggered a unified global response, focusing every resource on pulling survivors from the rebel before time runs out.